What's up, everybody? Today I want to answer a great question. High bar squats, low bar squats. Is one better than the other? First, let's identify a high bar squat and a low bar squat. Whether or not a squat is high bar or low bar is determined by the placement of the bar on your back. A good high bar position places the bar right on top of the traps. A good low bar position places the bar lower, usually resting on the rear delts. This may seem like only a minor detail, but it can drastically affect the entire squat position. You see, with any squat, high bar, low bar, front squat, narrow stance, wide stance, you must ensure that you are keeping the barbell over the center of your foot throughout the entire movement. This ensures you stay balanced. So, with that said, if you place the barbell in the high bar position, this automatically puts the barbell over the center of your foot. This forces you to squat with a very vertical position, knees forward, butt straight down. Now, if you place the barbell in the low bar position, this puts the barbell behind the center of your foot. In order to stay balanced, you have to sit your butt back and lean your shoulders and chest slightly forward. Now that you understand the difference between a high bar squat and a low bar squat, let's talk about some advantages and some challenges that come with each style. The high bar squat will build your quads like no other barbell movement. The extreme degree of knee flexion puts a lot of stress on the quads and forces them to grow bigger and stronger. Another great thing about the high bar squat is that it puts very little stress on the lower back if performed correctly. Because your hips stay under the barbell, there is no torque on the lower back. Forcing your knees forward and your hips straight down causes the hamstrings to shorten. This means the high bar squat neglects the posterior chain. This is not necessarily a bad thing. More on this later. One big challenge that comes with the high bar squat is the degree of flexibility needed to properly execute it. Pushing your knees forward requires very mobile ankles. Someone with poor ankle mobility will have a very hard time reaching depth and maintaining balance. Big proponents of the low bar squat will often argue that it's better than a high bar squat because it recruits more muscles. Utilizing more muscles during the squat should allow you to lift more weight, and it's going to help you increase your body weight. The more muscles you're using, the more muscles you're developing. Unlike the high bar squat, the low bar squat will put a tremendous amount of stress on the posterior chain. When performing a low bar squat, you initiate the movement by sitting the hips back. As you sit your hips back, you are lengthening the hamstring. This is also referred to as loading the hamstrings. This is why the low bar squat is great for someone wanting to build stronger hamstrings. Also, the further back behind the barbell your hips are, the more torque on your lower back. This is not always a bad thing. Some people use the low bar squat with great success to build up their hamstring and lower back strength. Another reason someone might prefer the low bar squat is because they have tight ankles. You can perform a low bar squat with a near vertical shin angle. This requires very little ankle mobility. Unlike the high bar squat, the low bar squat usually neglects the quads. When you sit your hips back, your knees are staying put. With the low bar position, you can hit proper depth with very little knee flexion. I know there are some who perform ass to grass low bar squats, and they are an exception. However, the majority of low bar squatters do not squat ass to grass, therefore neglecting their quads. This next disadvantage of the low bar squat is probably the biggest reason I might suggest avoiding it. For most low bar squatters, their squat position is identical to their deadlift position. The low bar squat is great for developing strong hamstrings. So is the deadlift. The low bar squat is great for developing a strong lower back. So is the deadlift. The low bar squat is great for developing and strengthening the entire posterior chain. So is the deadlift. If you regularly low bar squat and deadlift, you are repeating the same pattern over and over again. So, now that we're in the middle of this high bar, low bar tornado, let's start getting to the point. High bar squat, low bar squat. Which one should I do? That's going to depend on your goals and or your sport. For example, if you want to get better at the Olympic lifts, the snatch and the clean and jerk, you have absolutely no reason to include low bar squats into your routine. You need to practice deep, high bar squats with a very vertical torso because this is the position you will be catching the bar in. The term low bar squats should sound like a foreign language to an Olympic weightlifter or anyone who includes Olympic lifts in their routine. If you are a competitive powerlifter, you might find that because the low bar squat and the deadlift are such similar patterns, they actually strengthen each other. And you might also find that the low bar squat allows you to lift more weight. In this case, I would suggest including low bar squats in your routine. In powerlifting, the goal is to squat as much weight as possible, so you want to do whatever you can to put yourself at an advantage. In Olympic weightlifting, CrossFit, football, basketball, baseball, it doesn't matter how much you can squat once. What matters is how well you perform your sport. For most people, and especially for athletes, the purpose of lifting weights is to get better at something other than just lifting weights. If you are an athlete, or someone who just lifts for health and fitness purposes, or even someone who just lifts for enjoyment, you need to approach training from a big picture. You see, humans have 6 basic movement patterns: push, pull, squat, bend, twist, lunge, and gait, walking, jogging, or sprinting. In order to create a balanced program, we need to ensure we are covering those ranges of motion, more specifically, squat and bend. The deadlift is a bend pattern, hinging from the hips and engaging the posterior chain. The low bar squat could also be considered a bend pattern, hinging from the hips and engaging the posterior chain. Now, the high bar squat is the purest form of a squat pattern. In my opinion, the low bar squat is a variation of the high bar squat, just like the bench press is a variation of the overhead press. So, let's wrap things up. Here's my answer to the question: high bar, low bar, which is better? I will say that the high bar squat is better than the low bar squat because it is the purest form of squatting. Put the bar on your back, sit your butt all the way down, chest and head forward, stand straight up. And really, it's also the most natural way to squat. If you were taking a shit in the woods, would you do it with a low bar position? As a very general and broad tip, I would say that there are only 2 people who should regularly practice low bar squatting: powerlifters and someone who does not have the mobility to squat with a high bar position. Sometimes just the slightest adjustment of the bar can make a huge difference. If the low bar position helps you stay balanced throughout the squat, I don't see much harm in continuing low bar squats. If you don't have the mobility to squat with a high bar position right now, I would suggest doing your main sets with a low bar position and then training your quads and working on your mobility by doing lighter, high bar, and front squats with high volume for assistance. That's it, guys. I really hope you learned something. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me by commenting below. And always remember, tread untamed.